Hi, I'm Tom, and in this video we're going to have a look at the internship opportunities in the UK and how you can come in on a Tier 5 Government Authorised Exchange programme as a precursor to other visa routes and perhaps to staying permanently in the UK after switching visa. Now, you can see on this diagram that I've set out all the different kinds of Tier 5 visas that there are. Just to go to the purpose of this visa route, is for certain types of temporary worker whose entry helps satisfy cultural, charitable, religious or international objectives, including volunteering and job shadowing, which is what I'm going to focus on. Now, what the different routes are is as follows. So first of all, we have the overall points-based system under Part 6A of the immigration rules, and within that, you may have seen this elsewhere on YouTube, you have a youth mobility scheme, and then you have Tier 5 temporary worker migrants, and within that latter one you have all of these that I've listed here. Just here we're going to focus on Government Authorised Exchange because I think that's where the biggest opportunities are, and also where there's a greater scope for flexibility and getting involved in different companies that suit you. Now, as for what you can and can't do, this is where it does get very interesting, I think. You can study while you're doing your internship. You can, of course, and are expected to do the work described in your certificate of sponsorship, and I'll come to the process of how you go about securing that and what it says. You can do a second job for up to 20 hours per week, so that's unrestricted, and then you can do a job on the Tier 2 shortage occupation list as well for 20 hours a week, as well as your main job. And then you can apply to switch into an exceptional talent visa or exceptional promise visa if you're with a certain sponsored researchers. But I think the bigger point here is that once you're here in the UK on an internship, you can then use that as the opportunity for other things, and in particular for a Tier 2 general work visa, once you've established a relationship with your company in the UK while doing your internship. But also as an entrepreneur, this can be a precursor to a startup visa, potentially an innovative visa. But if you're a less experienced entrepreneur, certainly to a startup visa, having established relationships in the UK. So let's just go back to the diagram. You can also bring family members with you. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. Now, it's for either 12 or 24 months, and that depends on the type of body that is going to be sponsoring you. And I'll just go to the structure of that now and how it works. So I'm just letting these slides load. So there's a number of approved Government Authorised Exchange schemes, and I've just given some examples here. But what you have is an overarching body. You have a number of schemes, so there's 57 of them at the moment. And for each, you have an overarching body that is your sponsor. So you're not actually sponsored by the company where you're doing the internship. You're sponsored by the overarching body that has vetted that company. So the way it works is you have the list of sponsors, but then more importantly, you have a list of companies that are prepared to work with interns, and they're looking for interns. And on the course that I'm in the process of completing at the moment, you'll be able to sign in and access all of the internships that are available. So the important thing is that you're not actually sponsored by the company, you're sponsored by the scheme. So to access the companies, you have to go through different routes. As I say on the course, my objective is to make that as easy as possible for you. So the structure of it is as follows on this diagram that I've prepared. Okay, now just let that load. So you would choose a scheme and overarching body that would be your sponsor, and then you'd have a qualifying company where you'd actually do the internship, and that's where you'd be developing your relationships with an idea to then switch onto a tier 2 general visa, or develop relationships which will then help you to then found a company and potentially have prospective customers, so that you can then establish your company in the UK under a startup visa. You'd need to leave the UK first and then apply, so you can switch directly. But nevertheless, you'd have those important relationships and you'd have that foothold in the UK that's often necessary in order to get onto tier 2 general or the startup visa. So there's various requirements that each of the overarching bodies has, and in each case they're different. So I've just given some examples here. It's aimed at younger people. So most of the, again, 57 different programs are aimed at younger people, graduates or recent graduates. But you don't have to have graduated from within the UK. You could have graduated in any country. Unlike the youth mobility scheme under Tier 5, which is restricted to certain countries. So if you're applying from India or indeed from the US, let's say, then you wouldn't qualify, but you would qualify under the global mobility scheme. So here are some examples of the requirements that the overarching bodies expect of you as an individual. So you need to be over 18, a university or college graduate, or have graduated recently. Now there's some flexibility there. Some of the overarching bodies have will take you on if you graduated a number of years ago. You need to be studying or have completed your degree, in this case, in a brick and mortar establishment, so not an online degree. So again, there's different requirements around that, but most of them don't like you to have just had a correspondence course degree. In this case, the IELTS expectation is 6.0, which is of course quite high. And you're not looking to do something in hospitality, healthcare, construction, that sort of area. And then there's certain requirements surrounding the actual companies where you'd be doing the internship. So it can't be any old company, which is why I've compiled the list of internships and companies prepared to give internships in my course. So each of the overarching bodies requires that those companies' internships meet criteria. And again, this is just an example of one of their sets of criteria. That it be at least 6 months, they'd be paid at least at the minimum wage. If it's unpaid, then it's got to comply with the legislation governing how volunteers are dealt with. So again, you might be happy to volunteer, but there's certain requirements surrounding that. It's got to be at least 25 hours a week. Include complex activities, not just routine tasks. Includes sufficient supervision, so a 5-to-1 ratio of staff to interns at least. So that's an example of the sort of requirements that you could expect. Now, I've set out in this diagram some other requirements. There's certain requirements surrounding the certificate of sponsorship. In this case, which is interesting for Tier 5, it's not about filling a vacancy. You'll remember from Tier 2 that that's all about filling a genuine vacancy. But here, you're not filling a job role. You're coming in temporarily just for an internship. And then you've got to be skilled to RQF level 3 level, which is A level equivalent for the UK, which is very, very low. This is just the basic visa requirements, leaving aside any requirements that the overarching body might impose. Paid at least the minimum wage, and you're not going to be working too many hours. So the working time directive at the moment restricts companies from employing people for too long or too many hours a week. And then in relation to good old maintenance funds, the familiar requirement, 945 for 90 days and 630 for any family members that you're bringing over with you. So in terms of supporting documents, I'll just go to process and then deal with the supporting documents, how long it takes to get the visa. So to start with, your online application would be submitted. Then, which is familiar, you'd submit your biometrics at the Visa Application Centre. Again, that time doing this video, we're in the middle of the COVID, but I'm expecting, I've had various sources of information about this and contacts and so forth, but I'm expecting the Visa Application Centres to reopen in a matter of weeks. Again, I can't make any guarantees and everything, and there's inherent uncertainty in the situation. But the visa application centres are closed now, so you can submit your visa application, but it won't be processed until you can put in your biometrics. And we need to wait out the COVID crisis before you can do that. But then the visa application is approved. 2 weeks is a reasonable time frame, depending on exactly where you're applying. And then from that point, you've got 30 days to then come to the UK and lodge your and pick up your biometric residence permit. If you need to register the police, then you need to do that within 7 days. So that's the process, which is familiar to you potentially from other visa routes. This is what you have to bear in mind in terms of supporting documents. So you need to look back from the point that you're likely to submit your biometrics. As I say, there's uncertainty around that, but normally it would be about 2 weeks after you submit your online application, if you can book an appointment within that time. And there's certain documents that you'll need to really track back on, like criminal record certificate. It's got to be valid for 12 months, within the last 12 months. TB test, again 12 months, and your IELTS test is normally only valid for 2 years. So you have to check they're up to date. But importantly, there are some other documents you have to bear in mind and time specifically. So first of all, the certificate of sponsorship that you get is only going to be valid for 3 months up to the point you actually apply. So that's up to the point that you submit your online application. And your bank statements have to be valid. You're going to need 90 days of bank statements, and unless you're having your maintenance certified by the sponsor, which in this scenario is unlikely, because I say it's the overarching body that sponsors you rather than the actual company where you'll be doing your internship. So you need to have those 90 days of bank statements. And the bank statement, the last in that series, needs to be within 28 days. It needs to be updated. So it needs to be dated within 28 days of the point that you submit your biometrics. So for this, you need to look ahead a bit to the point that you actually submit your biometrics. Then count 28 days back, and that's the date of your last bank statements. And then those bank statements need to then cover 90 days. So the best way to look at it is as I've set out in this diagram, a 90-day period plus a 28-day period. And if you submit your application online and you're not able to get an appointment, then you just need to get updated bank statements before you actually attend your biometrics appointment. The other point is that you should just check that your passport has at least 6 months validity. So that is looking forward rather than backwards. And again, that needs to be at the point that you actually submit your biometrics. So that's the overall, that I hope is a helpful overview of the Government Authorised Exchange. I think for most people it's going to be better than youth mobility. and there's a number of advantages, and the actual internship can be for much longer than you would generally secure under the youth mobility scheme. So if you are considering an internship in the UK, check out the course that I've prepared, which is going to be linked below when it's published in the coming couple of weeks. I hope you're staying well and keeping safe, and I will see you in the next live stream. Thanks very much. Bye for now.